Hey there, welcome to this video about the planet Venus. So this weekly video is a bit different than the normal forecast because Venus is stationing retrograde this week and will be retrograde for about the next month or so. I wanted to chat with you about Venus as a planet from an astrological view and what kind of symbolism that brings up so that you can explore that over the next several weeks. So it is important to look at where Venus is transiting in your chart during this period, but what I want to really bring to you in this video is how to work with your Venus in your birth chart, and then how to work with Venus energy in general to really get this understanding of what Venus symbolism means. So the general keywords for Venus, of course, are some that you may already be familiar with. Love and relationships. Relationships is a big overarching one for Venus. Venus is also about sex and sexuality and attraction. So Venus is a symbol in your birth chart of the things that you are attracted to, the things that you find alluring, the things that you find pleasurable, and also the things that soothe you. So when we're attracted to something, we're typically attracted because it brings us a sense of feeling balanced and feeling soothed. So this is different than the attraction of lunar energy of the moon. The moon shows what we're attracted to and what we crave for a sense of comfort. Whereas Venus craving, Venus attraction is more about finding a sense of equanimity between yourself and being around other people. So there's this partnership element to it. And it is, in contrast to the moon. The moon is more about self-soothing, so that it's like the moon is really about filling up your reserves, whereas Venus is about finding this sense of interconnectedness and individuation at the same time. So being in relationship and then also having your own sense of self. So I hope that makes sense with those distinctions. And so because Venus is so much about relationship and partnership and attraction, it is also about the opposite. So about things that repulse us, things that we do not find attractive, that we have this magnetic pushing against. Venus is also about giving and receiving. And so as we're going to talk about these, I want you to be thinking about what of these topics is maybe challenging for you, or something that you want to go a layer deeper into within yourself, because these are all symbols of Venus. So when we're looking at transits of Venus, such as a retrograde, or when Venus is making an aspect to any of your planets, or a planet in the sky, or if we're just talking about your personal birth chart. So the way to make this more practical is if someone comes to me for an astrology session and they want to talk about relationship in any capacity, if they want to talk about partnerships, like intimate partnerships, or friendships even, or business partners. So I say that because we can look at astrology as a diagnostic tool also. So if you are working with partnership, you would look to Venus, among other things. But Venus would be the primary indicator that you would want to work with. And for you, we can also understand at a deeper level what is going on. So this is what I mean by astrology being a diagnostic tool. So if you were to come to me and say, Shauna, I'm having a challenge with communication in my partnership, and I feel like my romantic partnership, and I feel like we're just not on the same page, I would look at your birth chart and I would look at your Venus placement. So this means the sign that it's in, of course, but also the house that Venus is in, and the aspects that Venus is making, especially aspects to outer planets, because that's going to give me a feel for what's going on here. So there's many different tones that Venus can take on. We could layer this onto attachment theory. So when people attach, there are different styles that they have, and there's it's not so clear cut and concrete. Also, I find that there's a gradient. That's the word I was looking for. There's a gradient. So some people struggle with connecting initially, like actually having a deep sense of connection and being vulnerable. Some people, in contrast, struggle with maintaining a sense of their own self while also being in relationship. And some people, there's a lot of fear around relationships. Some people, there is a fear of getting too close. For some, it's a challenge around not being close enough and feeling like closeness is never enough. And so, of course, it sounds simple when I'm talking about it, but it's complicated when you're in it. So how to work with this more? I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. So when we're talking about Venus, I think, ironically, the best place to start is to start with yourself. To start with becoming aware of what it is that you are attracted to and what it is that you find pleasing. Now, of course, we can list out qualities of people that we find attractive, but I find it helpful to be more broad, because then you can get a sense for what it is that you like and what it is that you're attracted to. And maybe you've done this before, but I want you to be thinking about the kinds of things that bring you joy, that bring you pleasure, and this is going to change over time. So it's especially helpful within a Venus retrograde period like we're having now, or if you're watching this video at another time, it can be helpful anytime that you're just feeling a sense of disconnect, a sense of disconnect in relationship or disconnect in yourself. So I want for you to muse on, or to write down, or to meditate on the different things that feel good to you, that you're attracted to. So that could be anything from colors that you love, fabric, activities, places, people, qualities. And then also the opposite of that, the things that, sometimes there's a polar opposite, the things that you don't like, the things that really irk you. And I think that this is important to acknowledge as well, the things that agitate you, or the things that you feel a strong emotional aversion to, because that is part of shadow work in Venus. So anything that we feel a strong aversion to, it's important, because there is a strong emotional reaction there, and that means there is something inside of you that is responding to that thing. So whether it's a quality in someone, or even a color that you don't like, we could even do work with the chakras to see, okay, or color association or color therapy, like what is that color about, what does it symbolize, and what is it inside of you that feels a strong pushing away against that. Sometimes it can be that a person has an excess of that quality in themselves, or that there is, more often I find there's a judgment against that, a judgment or a belief against that thing. And instead of internalizing it and being it because it is seen as bad or not desirable, it is pushed away. So we want to look at that when we're talking about Venus, this aversion, because Venus is about relationship. And if there is something, this is working with the unconscious, and especially Carl Jung's work, that if there is something inside of you that you don't like, it's not uncommon to project that quality onto other people or onto other situations. And again, it's not always clear cut. Sometimes it's kind of like murky. So like if you don't like about yourself, like if you feel unconsciously that you are lazy in some way, or you feel like laziness is not good, that may be something that you project onto other people. Now that doesn't mean, it's not like equal exchange. That doesn't mean that you are lazy, but that means that there's something in you around, there's like this hang up around being productive, around enjoying downtime, around being versus doing. There's something there to look at. And so this is important to look at, because the more that you become aware of what brings up an emotional response to you, whether that is joy or aversion, the more that is going to be integrated into your own psyche, so that it's projected upon other people in your life less. I think that it's impossible for us to be entirely 1,000% self-aware all the time. Otherwise, we wouldn't have an unconscious, and I think that our world would implode in some way. So this is why relationship is so helpful, because when you're in relationship with someone else, they do show you parts of yourself, parts that you love and parts that you're like, oh, like that agitates me. And then how do you work with that within your own being? So I hope that makes sense. Take another sip of coffee. So to summarize that kind of chunk, or that piece, is anytime that you want to work with relationship, it helps to start with yourself, to start with what it is that you enjoy and appreciate, and also those qualities or things that bother you. And that brings in a sense of clarity within yourself, a sense of clarity in who you are, so that you can show up in relationships in a more like clarified is the word that's coming through, but also like in a stronger sense. Like there's more of you to bring into the relationship, and then people see you more as well. So I hope that makes sense. The other piece that I want to talk about here too is this sense of giving and receiving. So this is big when we talk about Venus energy. I've been musing on the symbolism around the goddesses Demeter and Persephone. And so Persephone, her story is about going down into the underworld and then coming back up and going back down. It's a symbol of the seasons of spring and summer and fall and winter, and this ever flow of going up and down. And we can see this in many different ways. We can see it as yin and yang energy. We can see it as giving out and then receiving in. We can see it as extroverting and introverting. And there's so many myths around goddesses where there is this flow. There is this moving out into the world. We see this in the lunar cycles every month, this flowing out and then this waning and drawing in. And so this is important to think about and to somehow incorporate into your life if you want to work with Venus energy. This idea of outwardness and then inwardness. So a great way to do this is to work with the lunar cycles and to plan your time with that in mind. But also, I think even bigger than that is just to notice your own personal energy stores. Like, when do you feel like it's time to do more and to be active and to be productive? And then when is your body, when is your heart calling for more downtime? I think that we get so like brainwashed into thinking that everything needs to be on all the time, and we need to be consistent and producing and always on. And I think especially in this time right now when I'm filming this, there is a challenge around that. There is like a disruption around that because many people can't be productive. Things are changing. Things are changing in your schedule. And so even more so, how this time of Venus retrograde is fantastic for thinking about how you can kind of like reset your productivity pattern, so to speak. So in a practical manner too, this would look like asking yourself how often you receive from other people, and how often you give. Which one of those is more uncomfortable for you? For people who identify either as women, or a female role, or a caregiver role, or highly sensitive or empath, all of those people that identify in those groups tend towards being more comfortable giving than receiving. That's just the way that our society's roles are situated. And so it may be interesting for you to think about how it is that you receive, how it is that you, like what, if someone does something for you, how does that make you feel? And also, when you do things for other people, where does that come from? Does that come from someone asking for it? How often are you preemptively doing and giving and producing in one way or another automatically? Is that like a knee-jerk reaction for you? And I think that this is important too when we're talking about Venus and we're looking for tendencies towards codependence as well. So codependence is when a person takes responsibility for the feelings or actions of another person, and that are not their own. So this is any time that you do something to try to control, unconsciously of course, to control someone else's experience. So when you try to do something for someone to make them feel better, or to make them happy when they're sad. Now of course, like, it's nice to do things for people, right? But it becomes problematic towards codependence when your main goal is not because you're like, oh, like I want to do this thing, when your goal is to try to fix someone, so to speak, or to change their experience, or to make them feel a certain way. And I realize that may sound kind of simplistic, but what's happening is where that's coming from, it's not coming from a place of wanting to give, it's coming from a place of wanting to take responsibility. Like, it's literally taking responsibility for someone else's emotions, because you're saying, okay, if I do this, then this person is going to behave in a way that I feel more comfortable. This person's pain is making me feel uncomfortable, so I need to do something about it. And so this is a big Venus topic, and pattern, if you've followed my work, you know that this is something that I'm really interested in talking about, and it comes up a lot in my client work as well. I find that Venus in aspect to Neptune, or to Pluto especially, or to Neptune, or Neptune and Pluto in aspect to other personal planets, especially the sun or the moon, these can be a symbol where there's potential for codependent behavior. And a big part of this is that the sense of self, the sense of I am, the sense of what I was just speaking about a moment ago, where you have this sense of clear identity of what it is that you like, what it is that you don't like. When that is not clear and strong, there is a tendency towards codependence, because there's kind of like this merging and this, again, like taking responsibility for someone else's emotions, because yours are not entirely clear. And again, this can be subtle, it can be more extreme. If you're interested in that topic, definitely check out the book Codependent No More by Melody Beattie. It's a fantastic book. So I think that's important. You know, codependence is not a sexy topic, and it's important to talk about when we are talking about Venus, because it is about the connection between how you relate to yourself and how you relate to other people. And the other thing that I'll say too is, so Venus is about attraction, right? What it is that we're drawn towards. We will be drawn toward situations that help us work out those kinds of things. So if there is something in relationship that you want to work on, again with Venus retrograde, it's a fantastic time to do so. And I think that working with Venus energy, working with relationships, it is about working with the other person in front of you, whoever that is, whether that's family, friend, lover, etc. But the other piece of that is working with yourself and working with your own energy, and this sense of also all of these things that we're talking about, like giving and receiving within yourself. When do you give to yourself? When do you receive from yourself? And what do you do for yourself to feel good and to feel harmonious? And how does that, you know, the things that you normally do, are those working for you or are those not working for you? Okay. So the last piece of this that I want to leave with you is, or actually, let's see, two different pieces. So if you want to work more with this, if you want to really work more with this, of course, it's helpful to do any kind of divination, to do journaling, to do reflection, to notice what the patterns are in your life, and to get really curious about the underlying meaning of a pattern. But also, of course, you can look at your birth chart and you can look at your transits. So again, if you want to do this on your own, you can look at your birth chart regarding Venus specifically, but I think it's also important to look at the chart as a whole. So what I mean by that is you can look at your Venus placement, so especially the house and the aspects that that Venus is making within your natal chart. But it's also important to look at, you know, the whole thing too, because if you have Venus, let's say, in one particular position where maybe Venus is an aspect to Neptune, so there's this tendency to idealize romanticism and to see people for what they could be versus they are, and to kind of get like swept away in romance. But then your sun and your moon are in very strong condition, or they're maybe in a more challenging condition. That's going to flavor the Venus energy as well. So I think it's important to look at the whole shebang. I mean, we wouldn't look at just one aspect of your life. We would look at like the whole, everything that's happening right now. So I hope that makes sense. Of course, I'm available for astrology consultations if that's something that you would like assistance with. And then the other piece that I would look at is if there's something that is challenging for, like there's an intense period of time, you can look at transits. Of course, transits and progressions. And when we're talking about Venus retrograde, Venus will be retrograde through the sign of Gemini. And so it's important to look at that swath of your birth chart, that area, because that will give you more information. So that the house that you have Gemini in, and to also look at aspects that Venus is making to your personal planet. So that's going to give you a little more information. That being said, I find that, it's almost more helpful to look at what's actually happening in your life. So we have to kind of look at both. We have to look at what transits are happening, and then what is already present in your life. So are you in a relationship? Are you single? Are you craving more friendships? Are you craving more connection with your family? Are you having challenges in the workplace? Like all of these things, whatever it is that's happening, that is what's going to come up. So whatever is kind of, it's also like the lunar cycles. So whatever it is that already has a potential for something coming up around relationships, that is what's going to express itself. And then when we look at the transit shows us kind of like the flavor, so to speak, like the emotional tone of it, if that makes sense. So I hope you found this helpful. I would love to hear from you, to let me know what it is that you're working through and how you'll work with this Venus energy. And of course, if you are interested in working with this more in depth together, let me know. You can send me an email at shaunamcgrath@gmail.com, or you can book a consultation with me on my website, shaunamcgrath.astrology.com. I'm sending you lots of love, and I'll talk to you soon.